for those of you who do not know her, she has been to Cuba many times since 1969 and is very knowledgeable on the subject, can answer many, many questions.
For those
And
who do not.
yeah, I think that it's really going to be worthwhile for people to learn about the possibilities of going to Cuba now before the Trump administration completely takes over. So, Merri, if you have any things you want to add.
Well, I don't want to add anything. I just disappeared from the scene because I've forgotten my introduction.
Okay. All right. So you have been introduced, and we will introduce again as more people arrive. Right now,
Well,
going
I
down.
think I'll just start the show.
Yeah, okay. Right.
Ready, everybody?
Yes, and you may continue up until the slides begin. You can put some introductory into the chat. Otherwise, you'll have to wait to do that until the end of the slide presentation. Is even using the chat. It's a little slow.
No.
There's 7 people who've put things in the chat, so.
Great.
Right.
So,
Virginia,
everybody, welcome
Sacramento,
again.
Richmond. There's people from all over the country here. Salt Lake City, Oakland, California. I used to live in Oakland. Virginia, Colorado. All right. Well, you'll have another opportunity later. So Merri, go ahead.
Here we go. So, you can visit Cuba. Cuba was a magic place in the U.S. imagination even before the Cuban Revolution. In fact, it has been a magical place in the U.S. American imagination since our own colonial settler days. Sometimes our imagination was maybe a little crooked, like we wanted to take them for our own, but we also shared baseball and rodeo and all kinds of things. It's still a magical place. Even now, when it's practically ground into the dirt by the heel of the U.S. government on its neck. Cuba has so much to offer in terms of science, culture, music, baseball, rodeos, dance, art, and community. Cuba has had a dream of independence crafted in the romantic liberation heroism of Antonio Maceo and the Mambi, the poetry and philosophy of Jose Marti. It has a history of striving for moral and ethical goodness and equality, forged in the Cuban Revolution of 1959 and the bedrock promises of Fidel's 1953 History Will Absolve Me, a program for social equality. It embraces the connectivity of humans, nature, and destiny brought to it with the Afro-Cuban experiences of Yoruba and Yamaya. Today, in spite of shortages and difficulties, it's a safe place, bursting at the seams with cultural events and activities, music, and dance. In the face of blackouts and shortages, the Cuban spirit struggles mightily to hold on to its joy and its sense of pride and self. It is nearly impossible not to have a good time when you visit Cuba. Its museums, its nightclubs, its community projects, its neighborhoods, sports events, dance performances, book fairs, or just wandering the Malecon or through the old city. Of course, it's also a blockaded country, one that the U.S. has spent 65 years trying to bring to its knees to cry out, Uncle Sam! It's not hard to get there, but you must know the U.S. rules to visit Cuba. So that's what we're going to talk about. And this may be a little brief, but then we'll have time for questions. So, why go now? It's nearby, it's safe, it's interesting. There is history, culture, natural wonders, great architecture, wonderful people, music, art, dance community. Cuba and the US have been intertwined socially, economically, culturally, and historically for 20 years, as I said, and I will say it again. Cuba and the US have since 1961 been in a unique relationship that has had Cuba fighting for its right to sovereignty and dignity, while the US has done everything it can to try to stamp out Cuba as a model of alternative ways to build society. You can support the Cuban people. As you are likely, what do you need to go to Cuba? As you are likely aware, as part of the US embargo, all travel there is strictly regulated. as the embargo is really about any transfer of money to Cuba. The regulations are handled by the Office of Foreign Assets Control of the U.S. Treasury Department, OFAC. In other words, this is not in the script. Turns out that our government owns our money. They've just lent it to us, and we can only use it the way they say. Anyway, no matter how you travel there, if you live in the United States, you are bound by these regulations. These regulations are to be taken seriously, are subject to change at the whim of the president alone, and I advise reading and understanding them. There's the link, and when we see links, Cole is going to put them in the chat, and then guess what, everybody? Everybody who's registered, whether they're here or not, is going to get a copy of this. Cuba, like all countries, has its own entry requirements, which are pretty straightforward and easy to understand and follow. The US regulations. Some of the most common categories of authorized travel are the following. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. You can read the regulations, you can ask questions later, but here's the gist of it. Most of you will travel in one of these categories. Support for the Cuban people, staying in private homes, interacting with Cuban people, and sharing ideas, eating at private restaurants, taking private taxis. That's not hard, right? Visits to family in Cuba. This category is usually Cuban Americans visiting their families. Academic research and professional meetings. It can be informal and field-based research, but must be in your established professional field with the likelihood of public dissemination. The same applies to meetings and conferences. Journalist, either a full-time journalist or a freelancer with an established record of publication. Note that on the Cuban end, you will need a journalist visa, which takes at least a month to apply for. There's another category, people to people, but we're not going to get into that because it's not really going to apply to us here today. Read the US regulations. You won't be allowed to get on the plane without a signed affidavit testing to your fitting into one of these or other permitted categories. Whoever you book with, however you book, somebody's going to ask you to check off one of these categories. The Cuban requirements. You'll need an entry visa issued through the airlines or the travel agency you're booking with. It's called a tourist card because in Cuba's eyes, you really are just a tourist, a visitor. They don't care what the US says. You're a visitor, they want you. De Viajeros. This is a custom and health form you should complete online 48 hours prior to flight. And there's the link that, again, Cole will put in the chat. Proof of Cuban health insurance issued with your flight ticket. This is important, and hold on to your boarding pass because that's your only evidence that you have the insurance should something happen and you have to go to the doctor. And it's because no matter what health insurance you have in the United States, it cannot be used in Cuba, and you can't even get it reimbursed without a lot of hassle. Persons born in Cuba follow different procedures depending on whether they hold a US passport or a Cuban passport and the year in which they arrived in the United States. It's highly recommended that you consult an agency experienced in travel arrangements for Cuban-born travelers, such as Marizul Tours, and you will hear about them again. Or you can talk directly with the Cuban consulate in Washington. You can look up the information here. There's a phone number and you can call them, but it's difficult to get through. We can help you with that. So, how should you travel? This is a personal preference and has to do with your own prior travel experiences. Cuba is a great country to visit on your own, a great country to visit with a tour group, a great country to visit with a brigade or a delegation. Let's now talk about some of them. Traveling as an individual or with friends and family. You pick your travel dates and your companions. You have flexibility on flights. You pick where you stay and where you go. You are on your own to explore or choose private guided tours. You can join a group tour or a brigade. Arrangements are then made with experienced tour operators or the brigades. Arrangements will include bus and guide, pre-selected accommodations, and some meals. There's a program of visits arranged ahead of time by knowledgeable people. There's a theme to the visit. You'll have a range of travel companions. Now here's a picture of a MAPA group in Cuba visiting with a local family doctor. Just had to get that in there. So how do you book on your own? I'll say again, it's fine to book on your own. Many people do. It really depends on your own comfort in making arrangements. And as I said, no airlines will let you on board unless you have the proper US and Cuban documentation, so no worries. If booking on your own, you will make your own flight reservations, make arrangements for accommodations using services like Airbnb for private homes. There are others, but Airbnb is pretty extensive. And note, if you want to stay in a hotel, even if the hotel is available for booking online, you should make sure it is not on the US prohibited hotel list. Almost all hotels in Cuba are, almost all of them. There's like a handful in Havana, one or two elsewhere in the country. That's it. And again, Cole will put the list of prohibited hotels there. So if you're looking at a hotel, look and see if it's on the list. If it's on the list, then if you stay in it, and anyway, just use your judgment there. Also, I recommend reading a guidebook, such as The Lonely Planet, for ideas on what to do, what the hours are for museums and other attractions, that sort of thing. And then this is a really nifty thing. Airbnb offers experiences in all the countries where they have private homes, and they have one for Cuba. And there's some really great and individual and small group private guided tours. There's museums, there's culinary tours, there's nature tours, there's music, dance, everything. And they're not expensive. So if you choose to book with a tour company or a special interest group, so there are many tour companies, big and small, find their websites, and then they will book you through, they will walk you through booking with them. They're mainstream companies like Road Scholar, Gate One, Holbrook, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you put in Cuba and tour on the web, you'll come up with a million of them. The specialty companies like Global Exchange, Colibri Travel and Tours, and others dedicated to specifically progressive travelers. There's an organization called Respect, which is for sustainable and respectful travel of Cuba. And it lists many organizations and tour operators, and it's a good resource. Medic organizes medical exchanges. Some faith organizations have delegations and exchanges with Cuba. And then organizations like the Nation, World Music, in the past National Geographic, and others often have organized tours to Cuba. Look for them. Excuse me. And if you're a graduate of a university, actually, a number of universities also have tours. You can also join a brigade or a delegation. Some of the best known are, and again, Cole will put this in the chat, the May Day Brigade, organized by the National Network on Cuba, the Venceremos Brigade, which is how I first went to Cuba in 1969. IFCO Pastors for Peace has friendshipment caravans and other delegations, Witness for Peace, and Code Pink. I'm sorry, I have the remnants of a cold, and it's affecting my voice. How do you estimate the cost? We'll take a look at this, and you'll get an idea. Right, I won't go over them one by one. But if you're going as an individual, you'll be paying these expenses separately. Oh, and here's an important note, which isn't in here, but is in travel tips, which I am providing you later on. You cannot use your credit card in Cuba. No, you cannot. You will see signs for credit cards everywhere, but that applies to everybody but people from the US, because guess what? US banks will not, they will not reimburse vendors in Cuba. So forget it, you can't use it. You take cash. And we can go over that in the questions, but we won't go over it more here. And my advice always is take as much money as you can. You don't have to spend it. You can bring it back, but you don't want to be caught short because it's really difficult to get money to you when you're there. Okay, so more costs. Brigades or delegations, such as May Day, Venceremos Brigade, Friendshipment, Witness for Peace, Code Pink. These run somewhere between 2,000 or 2,500 or less. Check with them, as there are often sliding scales or scholarships. I also forgot to mention that DSA has had, and other organizations, but DSA has had delegations in the past and may have them again. And that's another way to go. Tour companies. The tour companies are the high end. They run about 3,600 to 5,000, depending on the length of the trip and what is included. Places like Global Exchange, MEDIC, the Center for Cuban Studies, Cuba Puente, and Cuba Puente, they're not going to charge the high end. They're probably going to be more like 2,500. But I put them here by mistake. Again, look up the companies on that and say, okay, how do you get there? Who flies to Cuba from where? American Airlines really leads the way, other than the charter companies, which we'll get to. 8 flights a day from Miami to Havana, 7 days a week, flights from Miami to Santa Clara, 4 days a week from Miami to Santiago, Holguin, and Camagüey. And here's it. All of the commercial airlines only allow 2 bags. And either it's included in your fare, depending on your fare, or it's 35 or 40, depending on the airlines. And then the second bag, some of them charge 100, some 150, and American charges 200. United Airlines has daily flights from Los Angeles to Havana via Houston, meaning they also have daily flights from Houston. Southwest has daily flights from Tampa to Havana with more limited connecting flights. So Baltimore, Chicago, Hartford, and Pittsburgh are some of them. And Southwest includes 2 bags free of charge, but again, they can't be more than 50 pounds each. Then there are charter flights. As you can see, there are a lot of charter flights. The hours vary, with only some having afternoon departures, and you can look each of them up and go. You would book a separate, with the commercial airlines, you can often book all the way through on the same airlines, and then your luggage goes all the way through. With the charter flights, you have to book the trip separately. You have to allow 3 hours for check-in. But unlike the charter flights, the commercial flights, the charter flights permit up to 3 and sometimes more bags, each 70 pounds each, at a cost of $35 a bag and $1 a pound. That varies from charter company to charter company. The flights are to Havana, Santa Clara, Holguin, and Santiago, depending on the charter company. Then you can get there. You can get there from Canada. You can get there from Mexico, from the Bahamas, from Panama, with Copa out of Miami, from France, from Spain, from Russia, from Brazil, from Colombia. You can get there from all over the world. But remember, as a person who lives in the United States, no matter what route you take to Cuba, all U.S. regulations and travel to Cuba apply to you. If you are traveling under one of the OFAC general license categories, or you have a special license, you may fly to Cuba from whatever part of the world you choose. If you choose to travel outside the U.S. regulations, you may be challenged by OFAC and face financial and legal consequences. So if you're flying within the regulations, make sure you have a travel David, which they won't give you, these other airlines, from other countries, but which you can acquire online, and make sure you can show it. But then, if the regulations change under Trump, there may well be deliberate travel challenges organized, which will be from third countries, as the U.S. flights could get canceled or severely limited. And travel challenges will be something that we'll all have to deal with if the regulations change and travel is curtailed, and it may be something that you choose to join or not. Best thing to do is travel now. Get your first trip in. Where to stay? Bed and breakfasts, aka homestays, aka private homes, which are, at this point, the majority of the choice. Airbnb offers the widest range of choices. There are other ways to book B&Bs, including with some travel agencies. So just look for it. In Havana, we recommend staying in Vedado, Centro Havana, or Old Havana. Transportation from other areas is complicated. In other parts of the country, look for places that are near the center of the city. Most cities in Cuba are very walkable. As I say, there's other B&B booking services, but be sure they not only take your payment, but find out how they get the payment to your Cuban hosts and with what commissions charged, and make sure you can actually get in touch with those hosts. Hotels. Again, most hotels are prohibited. There are a handful that are not. Look on the prohibited list. And here's something important. Even if a hotel offers bookings online, which they do, you can look up any hotel and they'll book you online. And then see if they accept your payment online. But watch out, it could be on the prohibited list, and so you would be taking a risk staying at it, right? Booking with a travel agency. Be sure that the travel agency you work with not only can make flight arrangements and book private homes, remember most hotels are forbidden, but actually knows both Cuba and the US regulations. In other words, it used to be you had to have a special license to book travel to Cuba, no more. Anybody can do it, but they don't necessarily know what they're doing. An experienced Cuba travel agent can walk you through the US regulations, advise on flight schedules and flight options, book the best flights for you, advise on what hotels are not prohibited, not just in Havana, but all over the country. Line up a B&B. Though the online booking services may have more options than the travel agencies, because the travel agencies go through a counterpart in Cuba, and advise you on the best neighborhoods in the cities you are visiting. They can line up other services for you. They can provide you with your visa and walk you through the Viajero process. Line up a B&B. Pardon? Though the online booking services may have more options than the travel agencies, because the travel agencies. Actually, we're going to take all questions afterwards, please. Advise you on the best neighborhoods in the cities you were visiting. They can line up other. Wait a minute. Why are we getting an echo call?
That was just David making a comment, but I have muted him.
Oh, okay. Sorry, we'll answer questions afterwards. But travel agencies can also provide a contact for you in Cuba in case you need help. And we unapologetically recommend Marisol Tours. In the business since 1979, they know what they're doing. And Cole will put the telephone and the email in the chat. Getting around Cuba. If you are with a tour or a delegation, you're going to have a dedicated bus with a driver and guide assigned to you for all scheduled program activities. When you have free time, the best way to get around is on foot or by taxis. Taxis can be found at most hotels, and also there is the service La Nave, which is the Cuban version of Uber or Lyft. But download the app before leaving home. If you're traveling on your own, and in the travel tips, which we're going to have a link to, it tells you about telephone service and stuff like that. If you are traveling on your own, walking and taxis are best in the city. Buses are crowded and infrequent with long lines. There are places in the major cities that rent bicycles. Look it up before traveling. I actually have some friends who did bicycle in Cuba. In fact, they took their bicycles, but then they rented bicycles there. Anyway, there's bicycles. For long distance travel, there's the bus service via Azul. And Cole will put the link for that in the chat. You can book your trip ahead of time. There are people with private cars who will drive you anywhere so long as they have gasoline, a scarce commodity these days. There are car rentals. It's advisable to line a car up from the US very far in advance, as there is high demand. On the web, you will find agencies that rent cars in Cuba. What to do in Cuba? No matter when you go to Cuba, there's more to do than you can fit in your days. All the cities of Cuba have museums, music clubs, artists, craftspeople, and other interesting things to do. It's sometimes hard to find the day-to-day activities until you're there, but you can try to plan ahead this way. You can check websites such as La Papalete, which will go into the chat. You can comb through Facebook, which has multiple websites. They have websites for the National Theater, the ballet. You can go online. I didn't put this in to baseball, Beisbol, and find when there's games, which are usually March through July. And you can check out the Airbnb experiences for activities of every kind. You can also plan your trip around special events. And I'm going to give you a second to read this, or maybe you already have while I've been talking. But there's umpteen events all the time. There's something going on in Havana and most cities. The biennial art fair started in November and it's still going through February. The Jazz Festival is the 27th to February 3rd, and World Music in Cambridge is actually planning to take 80 people to it. So you can sign up with that. The International Conference for World Balance, which I and others are going to as delegates. It's people from 89 different countries, thousands of people, to discuss the world we want to have. The International Book Fair, which takes place in the fortress across the bay, and it's, all these little rooms, full of books and people and from all over the world, and it's just fabulous. And then there's a fairway with food and another fairway with rides. It's really something. And then February through March, practically all the dance companies seem to have performances. Every weekend there's a performance. And then in March, there's a percussion festival. There's the Santiago Alvarez Memorial Documentary Festival. There's the World Music Festival. And then I don't think it made on here. There's the Low Budget Film Festival, but I can't remember when it is. And then look at April, and then May Day. You could join the May Day Brigade from the United States. It's really a once in a lifetime opportunity, or maybe a twice or three time opportunity. And then May to August, there's the festival, there's the International Rap Festival. And in fact, there happens to be a vice minister of culture for rap in Cuba. So those events are a little Havana-centric, but you can comb through and find others. And then, one more thing. You can take a suitcase of medical supplies to Cuba. Now that you are thinking about going to Cuba, let's talk about something you can do to help the Cuban people. As you've heard, Cuba is suffering from dire shortages, especially medical shortages, most importantly attributable to the US embargo and sanctions and being on the list, preventing trade with many companies and blowing up banking relations and credit. And we have invited a special guest on here to talk with us about these suitcases, Carl Eaton of Not Just Tourists. Can you pin Carl? There he is. Cole, could you pin him and give him the floor? And Carl Eaton, welcome. I've just met you myself. I called you because I was just so impressed with what you do. And please tell us all about it.
I'm glad to, Merri. Thank you so much for inviting us, or Not Just Tourists, to talk with everybody here. Most of the people on this call, I should know that Cuba is struggling mightily these days with getting just about anything into the country, but medical supplies are in particular need. Not Just Tourists has been around for quite a while. It started 30 years ago in Canada, and Canada never joined in the embargo. People from Canada travel easily to Cuba. And what happened about 30 years ago is a couple of doctors from Not Just Tourists were traveling to Cuba for vacation, and they noticed the need for medical supplies. And they said, well, we come back every year, let's bring medical supplies next time. So they brought a couple of suitcases of medical supplies and mentioned it to their peers, and pretty soon other people were bringing medical supplies. And that was the start of Not Just Tourists. So it actually started as a result of supplying Cuba. In those 30 years since it started, Not Just Tourists has passed out over 15,000 suitcases with travelers, not only to Cuba, but actually to any developing country around the world. So Cuba is number one as far as quantity. So that equates out to over 1 million pounds of medical supplies that Not Just Tourists has supplied, not only with tourists, but they also do container shipments, bulk shipments to Cuba also. My chapter, my wife and I's chapter, was the first United States chapter. We started in 2018. And we have supplied Cuba just in those 7 years, well, 5 years if you take away the pandemic, we're approaching 400 suitcases just from our one chapter. So we've been very, very active with Cuba. So what exactly is Not Just Tourists? Well, we get medical supplies donated to us from hospitals, and these are items that are brand new in the package, but due to rules and regulations would normally be thrown away here in the United States. We then combine them with donated suitcases from individuals and luggage stores, etc. And then when travelers are going to Cuba or other developing countries, we'll give them a suitcase filled with medical supplies and help connect them to a clinic near wherever they're staying. Everything that Not Just Tourists does is free. In fact, we don't even take financial donations. And it's really a very, very easy way to give back to Cuba or other countries that you're visiting. Not Just Tourists currently is spread out there. I believe there's 10 chapters in Canada. There's another 10 chapters here in the United States. In addition, our chapter, we're in California. We actually have an arrangement with outdoor retailer REI, and REI allows us to ship suitcases anywhere in the United States. So just as an example, if I wanted to send a suitcase to Merri, who's in Massachusetts, I could send her a full-size suitcase filled with medical supplies for probably close to $25, maybe a little bit less than $25. So that's the only thing that we actually ask for money, is shipping reimbursement. So the way to do this, it's real simple. You would simply register on Not Just Tourists, and the website is njt.net. And there'll be a nice big blue button there that says take a suitcase. And you click on that and follow the instructions. The whole process takes less than a minute. So it's real easy to do. If you want to reach out to us, I will put in the chat our email, and we'd be glad to answer any questions for people. But I think I'll end this with saying that I'll give you an example. We supplied over 100 suitcases to the Mayday Brigade last year. And as we reached out to Cuba and to doctors and connections we had there, we asked for a list of what they most needed. And one of the things on the list was sutures, which to me is just fancy fishing line. But anyway, the conditions in Cuba were so bad, and they still are, that they could not get sutures. So we have ever since packed most of our suitcases almost as full as we can with suture material. So it's just an example of something that's so easy to get here in the United States that, because of the blockade, is almost impossible for Cuba. Other things like basic Tylenol, ibuprofen, etc. Hospitals in Cuba don't even have basic items like that. So the need there is horrible. But it's so encompassing that it's so easy to help them out. So if you do travel to Cuba, and travel while you still can, I strongly suggest you look into Not Just Tourists, and we'll be glad to give you some medical supplies to bring. And I'm going to stick around, so if there's any questions at the end, I would be glad to answer them. Thank you, Merri, for letting me talk.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad you're here. There's a little bit more of the slideshow, and then we're going to go to questions. Cole, how much beyond 8:30 may we go?
You may go as long as your attendees wish to listen to you, Mary.
Hey, well, we'll see what happens then. Thank you, Cole. Cuba or take a suitcase. You can still help. As Carl said, the need is really great. And we have set up the Cuba Assistance Network, thanks to Howard Ehrman, Cesar Sanchez, and Isaac Lee. And you can go to it and it will link to you. It will link to you to not just tourists, but also to all of these organizations, including Global Health Partners, which sends syringes, pacemakers, sutures, all kinds of things. The People's Forum, which has been sending generators, the Canadian Network on Cuba, Paz Amor, which is a Cuban American who takes supplies, IFCO's Pastors for Peace, Friends of the Episcopal Church, the Hatway Project, and others. Do go to those websites and do see if you can just make a small donation. And then when you come back, we do not know what the new administration will do. Trump made life very hard for the Cuban people last time. And with the new Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, the evil twins may make it a horrible situation even worse. So there are organizations throughout the United States that have fought for years to change U.S. policy towards Cuba. You can join with them to challenge and change U.S. policy towards Cuba. And that includes this whole list, which I think, Cole, I gave it to you to put into the chat. But if not, it'll come to you with the slideshow in a follow-up later. And these are solidarity organizations, they're policy organizations, they are advocacy organizations, faith-based organizations, political committees, and our own local July 26th coalition, and last but not least, Mass Peace Action. And there we are in action in Coolidge Corner for those of you who live in Metro Boston. And that's our banner. And with that, we'll end the slideshow and the presentation. And Claire, Cole, can you turn on the chat? And Claire, I think it's best if Claire reads out questions. And then if we have time, we can have people talk. But
So a few questions came to me in the chat during the time that they couldn't chat with each other. I don't know if you got them too, Claire, or not, or if just I got some of them. I have three good questions that I saw at least that I could throw out. Did you get them, Claire?
I don't see that I got them. Wait a minute, let me close the participants thing.
Let me start up with those. The first is that Airbnb is on the Palestine boycott list. And as a supporter of BDS, I have to agree with the person who made this point that we should not be promoting Airbnb.
okay, here's the answer to that question, because somebody asked me that recently, so I looked it up. Airbnb is a U.S. company with U.S. owners. You can look it up. It's actually a publicly traded company. The problem with Airbnb is the problem with a lot of U.S. businesses, which is that they do business in occupied territories. They offer Airbnbs in settlements. So you can choose to boycott them, but be aware that you're not boycotting an Israeli company. You're boycotting a company that does business with Israel.
Okay, next, Nina Rodriguez. She asked, under U.S. regulations, how long can you stay in Cuba? And she mentions that the International Film Festival is in November.
The International Film Festival is in December, actually, and usually starts the first week in December, and it may have finished and it may still be going on. But under the U.S. regulations, there's no time limit on how long you can stay in Cuba, none at all. there used to be a limit on how much money you could spend, and I don't, but that was per month. Under the Cuban regulations, as a tourist, because you're entering on a tourist visa, you can stay for 30 days, and then you need to renew your tourist visa. I may be mistaken, maybe 60 days, but let's say 30 days. And then you can renew your tourist visa with evidence that you are staying in either a hotel or a private home, and B&B. And you can renew that visa up to 6 months, I believe it is.
Okay, there's another question. I could read this one, Cole. Dwayne Plaza to everyone. I would like to bring a group of students again from Oregon State University. I did this in 2013 and 2014 during the summer. And let's see, the thing just jumped. All right.
Well, I can just answer from there.
Yeah,
One
they
of the
use
things
Martin
I
Luther
love to
King Center. Yeah.
One of the things I love to do when I ran an organization called Common Ground for 20 years. And one of my favorites to send were student groups. And I booked a lot of student groups. There are a number of places that do this now. There are places that specialize in study abroad.
Mhm.
The first thing to do, of course, as I'm sure you already did when you set it up last time, is you talked to your international travel or your study abroad office. But then in terms of making the arrangements, in terms of making the arrangements, you go through a travel agency like Marizul. There's others, but I'm out of touch with what other ones are out there that are good. But you can find them.
And they mentioned
And somebody said that I'm wrong, that tourist visas are now good for 90 days, are renewable every 90 days. Can you put that up again? What that said, Cole?
Well, Sarah Wilson wrote that it's an e-visa, it's good for 90 days plus renew for 90 days. That's what Sarah.
Okay, so they've changed that since they've gone to an e-visa. I'm behind the times. See, I am a resident, so I don't get visas anymore. So I'm sorry I'm out of step.
Okay, now listen, people, a lot of people are asking questions directly to me. Please do not do that. Instead, put your questions to everyone, and then Claire will see them and ask them, okay?
And then everybody else will see them too.
All right. I just want to make sure this question about the that was raised by Dwayne Plaza. I guess they use the Martin Luther King Center as their base. Do you know if they're still
Yes.
operational to accept school groups? And do you have recommendations of other providers in Cuba for school groups? And I guess they used a provider in Wisconsin, can't recall their name.
Well, I can't recall their name either, but what you can do is you can talk to Witness for Peace, the Solidarity Collective, and they can tell you how to do it, or they can actually organize it for you because they work directly with the Martin Luther King Center. So does IFCO Pastors for Peace.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I'm not going to have the answers to everything.
Right.
Unfortunately, I wish I did.
Also, there's
So
something here.
I saw a question breeze by that I want to answer, which is somebody who lives in Mexico but is a U.S. citizen. Do I have that question correctly?
There's one. I am a U.S. citizen with legal residency in Mexico. Do the
Okay,
same
the answer
OFAC rules
is
apply to me?
the answer is that the United States claims you as their own under the regulations. Everything. I mean, this should come as no surprise. So you could go directly from Mexico to Cuba using your US passport, and maybe nobody would know. But the reality is that you would be in violation of the US regulations. So that's your personal decision, right?
Right. And that's
But
was answered by
if you're a
another-
US citizen, or you live in the United States, or you're passing through the United States, in its own inimitable fashion, claims to have jurisdiction over you. It should come as no surprise.
There's another question now. What
Yeah.
happens if we organize a trip this winter, February, March, and then Trump eliminates travel?
So now this is a very good question. I know in the past, and I don't really know the details about this because I was retired by the time this happened, there was something about people to people travel, that if you had organized a trip before the certain regulations went into effect, you were in fact grandparented in. That may be the case. If you're organizing a group trip, whatever agency you're doing it through is responsible for making sure they have the answer to that. And I will, yeah, that's basically that. So we don't know, we have no idea what that man is capable of, let alone what his henchman, Marco Rubio, is capable of. We have no idea. But I would go ahead and plan it. I would just make sure that if anybody puts money down, they're going to be able to get it back if the worst happens. But I would guess that if you make a plan now for February and the boom gets dropped, that probably you will be grandparented in. No guarantee. Make sure you can get your money back.
Okay, Connor Sealam has two questions. A question on the telephone and email in Cuba section for preparing for your Cuba trip. What does it mean to make sure your phone is unlocked? Two, could you provide the link to the baseball schedule again?
Okay, so unlike most parts of the world where they sell you a telephone and then they sell you a SIM card, and those are considered two separate things, in the United States, all of the telephone companies, except some random ones that you buy in 7-Elevens, lock your SIM card so that you can only use their services. But thanks to, I think, probably some feisty battlers, they have to unlock it. So I have, for instance, T-Mobile, and T-Mobile will temporarily unlock my telephone for 30 days. If I want it permanently unlocked, then I have to make sure that I paid the full price of the telephone. And then it's mine and it can be permanently unlocked. So what that means is if you have a Verizon phone and an Apple phone, T-Mobile, whoever, you can only use their SIM card unless you get it unlocked. So you do that before you leave. And if you're going for less than 30 days, you should be able to get at least a temporary unlock.
Another question is, weather-wise, when is the best time of year to visit?
Oh my goodness, you are asking the wrong person. You know why? To me, the weather in Cuba is only tolerable in January and February. The rest of the time it's too hot. But, so I was there in September and I died of the heat. I was there in November and it was tolerable, hot but tolerable. January and February are nice. March for me, it's beginning to heat up again. April, it's beginning to get hot. And I won't go after June myself. But that's me. I have a daughter who loves the heat. She lives in Florida and she just thinks it's terrific.
Well, Sarah Wilson is an attendee who put in her opinion as December to April is personally, but she likes November to April. All right. Are there more questions? Okay. Okay. I'm Charles Sharp. I'm in the disaster risk management and advised the Caribbean Disability Network. How difficult would it be to meet public health and disaster emergency management officials?
This is close to my heart. Do you know that Cuba has amazing expertise in disaster relief? And I've actually seen them at work. And the neighborhood I used to live in was completely flooded. And as soon as the water started receding, I have to tell you that civil defense was in there. They were draining out people's water. They were replacing mattresses. They were doing this and that. And then during COVID, civil defense was basically put in charge of things. So that, for instance, if they needed to quarantine a neighborhood, they'd quarantine a neighborhood and bring in all the supplies that were needed and make sure everybody was taken care of and so forth and so on. We actually at MAPPA did a webinar. Cole might be able to find it with the emergency management team at the Ministry of Science, Technology, and the Environment. And I actually, in November, was at the Civil Defense headquarters in Havana. I think if we could find that or put them in touch with Vernon Cole, that they might be able to get in touch with these people and then write to them, email them, and see if they could connect with them when they're there. I
Yep.
used to have a friend who worked in civil defense, but he went on to work in something else. Was there another part of that?
Well, Cole was going to respond to your question.
No, I'm just saying we can try to find that webinar, or we
Okay.
can put them in touch
All right.
with
I
Vernon.
do remember it myself too. So, I see, there's a lot in the chat. Does the chat also go when you send the recording? Do people also see the chat?
No, that would be up to either you or Mary, whoever sends the follow-up email to the attendees,
Right,
which
right.
elements to put into that email.
Okay.
Yeah,
Are there
right.
any agroecology? There is an agroecology organization in Vermont that does a lot of work. And if you put into Google agroecology in Vermont, you may come up with that connection. The person who had that question. But that would be a wonderful thing to look at. There's a lot of interest in permaculture in Cuba. There's this wonderful family called the Funezes that have a farm in I think Artemisa. And then there's a permaculture farm in Matanzas that's a combination of permaculture farm and art gallery and sculpture gallery. But you could Google agroecology and you would find stuff. Agroecology Cuba, and you'd find stuff.
Okay, I want to also add, Sarah Wilson had responded to confirm, Mary, that you're correct. That in the past, if you made one payment, you were able to complete your trip under the rules in place. Only at the time of payment, only cruise ships were canceled at the moment. And the other point is a Viajeros form now becomes available to fill out 7 days prior to arrival. You need to fill out the form, validate the e-visa. So those are some sharing points she's sharing. There's a question, Richard Karsten. I can bring a NJT net suitcase January 4th, but I don't see the website, on the website, how to get it shipped to Western Mass. Please advise. I think that's something that
You're on, Carl.
Carl would have to respond to.
Yeah, so the way shipping works, the relationship that Not Just Tourist has with REI, the outdoor retailer, we're the only chapter that has that relationship. And unfortunately, they limit us to 4 suitcases a week. And just, for example, we're actually now booked till mid-January with those 4 slots every week. So, Richard, I wouldn't be able to help you out because it's coming up so close. I will tell you that just going to Costco and buying those big bottles of ibuprofen and general pain relief will be very well received. So you can kind of make your own care package up, if you will. But we do recommend, if you do want us to ship, that if you can give us at least 2 weeks, and at certain times of the year even more, like for the May brigades, for example, we were booked just about the middle of March for May. So because there were so many people that took suitcases. So
Okay.
just give us advance warning and we'd be glad to ship it out to you. Our Orange Beach, Alabama chapter does a limited amount of shipping. But it may be too close to your trip, Richard, to have any shipping done.
I have another suggestion too. Carl, I think you have a list of the priority needs, right? And Richard, what the MAPA group did when they went down is I got the list from my family doctor in the neighborhood I live in. And then the MAPA group just went on Amazon and bought everything. If you don't object to going to Amazon, otherwise you can go to another big conglomerate like CVS. But also, the other thing that I've done is, you know, the Visiting Nurses Association at Cooley Dickinson. Richard is practically my neighbor. They have they have endless supplies of leftover goods of people who've stopped services for them for one reason or other. They just give them to them. And the visiting nurse that I had a couple of years ago was just driving around with all this stuff in the trunk of her car. And it was things that people really need, like bandages and catheters. You know, and that won't cost you anything, whereas ibuprofen and so forth will cost you something. But also, well, I think that's my best advice. Carl, do you have lists of what's required? And if not, we'll ask Bob Schwartz, who's on the call.
Yeah, we do have lists directly from hospital and medical professionals in Cuba on what they need the most. But you really can't go wrong if you just give them basic stuff. We specialize in sending Cuba hospital-related items, things that they can't even get at all. And we get plenty of supplies, but even basic things, they run out of bandages, IV flushes, gloves, all those basic things, they can't get those either. So, yeah, any of those things. And we can send you a list, Richard. Our email is on the chat there. Go ahead and send us an email and we'll share that with you.
And then Carl probably has excuse me, wait one second, Claire, I want to finish up this.
Okay.
Which is, Carl probably has a list of clinics, but if not, I'll be getting there on the 1st. So by the time you come, I can give you a family doctor or a clinic or polyclinic you can take that to. But I also want to see if Bob Schwartz wants to add anything to Rich's question. Are you still here, Bob? You may have left already.
Okay. Well, here's another. Sarah is asking whether it's a question to not just tourists. Do the supplies get sent throughout the country or do they remain mostly in Havana, the West?
If you look at the Not Just Tourist website, there are literally 100 to 150 individual clinics spread out through Cuba where Not Just Tourist has donated to in the past.
Okay.
That being said, the main hospital in Havana, I believe it's called Calexico, they will actually take the supplies and distribute them to the various clinics around the area. So there's two different ways to do it. You can give it to a small clinic, which will gladly accept it, or you can go through the main hospital to let them basically distribute it for you.
And that's the Calixto Garcia, and it's very easy to get to, Rich.
Well, I have a question that somebody asked, but I'm not sure which website. Joe Amrine has asked, can I get the website? I'm not sure which website are you referring to. So if you could put that in the chat. Let's see. Nina Rodriguez. Having a Brazilian passport, can I just enter Cuba with it and not use my American one, not having to be under US regulations?
Well, as I keep saying, it doesn't matter what passport you have. If you are going from the United States, you are subject to their regulations. So you could use your Brazilian passport. You probably need your US passport to get back in to the United States, particularly given the new regulations that the US has on such things. But the point of fact is that the United States, you remember all this discussion of the US empire? It applies to us here at home too. And you know, supposing you were from Japan, this has actually happened, true story. I have a friend who came from Japan to the US first, and then she wanted to go to Cuba. Well, she had to go under the US regulations. She had to fit in one of the categories. And the other new thing, which I'm not even going to go into, is there's this new thing that even if you're if you live in a country that doesn't require a visa to enter the United States, if you go to Cuba, now you have to get a visa to come into the United States. You know, it's like, anyway. Is there another question?
Okay, I'm in Charles Sharp. I'm in Washington DC area. Is
Wait a
it?
minute, hold on 1 second, Claire. The baseball is spelled in Cuban, Beisbol. And if you put in baseball, Cuba, the website will come up.
All right, so the person in Washington DC, is it advisable to obtain tourist visa 90 days ahead of traveling with a group at the end of January?
Well, here's the thing. If you're traveling with a group, then whoever's making the group arrangements is also going to get the e-visa for you. If you're going through a travel agency, then they will facilitate the e-visa. If you are going with an airlines, they do. The fact of the matter is that you have to get a visa through an entity that has a contract with the Cuban consulate. And those are agencies and airlines.
Okay.
So in other words, it doesn't matter whether you get it 90 days ahead of time, 30 or whatever. I mean, it depends on how you're traveling. If you're just booking a flight, then you'll see online how to go about getting your visa, or they will give it to you in the airport. One of the two.
So I think you already answered. There's a question. Sorry, what is the link to the baseball schedule again? You said just go to the site, make sure you spell.
It
Oh,
might be
Baseball Cuba.
baseball.cu, beisbol.cu. It might be, but I'm not sure,
Okay.
so Google it.
All right.
Connor, did you just thumbs up because that's right? Yeah, and the season is March through July. Sometimes they have special games outside the season,
Okay.
but also it doesn't mean that they're going to be playing in the city you're in, right? But on the other hand, people play baseball on street corners, so you'll find a game somewhere.
Okay, another question from Sarah Wilson. What general license do the brigades usually travel under?
Well, you would have to ask the brigade that question, what license they use. I wouldn't want to speculate because when I went on the Venceremos Brigade, it was 1969, and we were totally forbidden to go, and we had to go through Mexico, and we couldn't get back in through Mexico, so we had to take a cattle boat to Canada. I'm sure that, and since the Venceremos Brigade has been going all those years, and the Cuban regulations, I used to say they changed as often as the New England weather, but that's no longer the case. They change like climate disaster. So I'm sure they've gone through many different categories over the years.
There's a couple more questions. I want to note that it is now 8:39, so I don't know how much longer you want to go, Mary.
How much longer do people want to go?
Well, it's hard to tell. How many people are still on, Cole? It's 28 participants still.
Okay,
there's
I have
still
a
some
question. Wait a
questions.
minute, can I ask a question?
Sure.
if you're not showing your picture and know where to find your video and know where to find your virtual hand, would you raise your hand if you are thinking of going to Cuba soon?
You want people to raise their virtual hand.
I do. I
Okay.
do.
I see 2, 3, 4.
Does anybody want to go to the World Equilibrium Conference? Last year, there were 1,100 people from 89 countries trying to figure out what to do with this world we're in.
I can't, Cole, can you see all the hands that are raised? Because I'm looking at the chat more.
Well, I'm not seeing enough
I think
hands.
there were 8 or 9 in the participants dialogue, and then
Well,
whoever raised their
At
first.
least you're learning how to go, and you'll go sometime.
Right. And you're gonna get
And-
all these slides and everything too.
You're going to get all the slides. Yes, you will.
Now, there's a
And-
question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Sylvia
And you've
Aguirre.
got my WhatsApp. You've got my email.
Right, so you can contact Mary, she'll be bombarded. So
Yeah,
Sylvia
I'll be bombarded.
Aguirre would like to, she's a retired nurse and would be very interested in an opportunity to volunteer in a clinic. Do you know of any brigades that include this?
That's a lovely thing. I actually spent the pandemic volunteering with my family doctor in my neighborhood because I wasn't going anywhere, was I? But generally speaking, they don't have volunteer opportunities like that. Some of the faith-based organizations have joint projects with their counterparts in Cuba, and MEDIC, which is in the list, MEDICC, look it up, has medical delegations. And actually, there's somebody on this call whose daughter did one of their rotations when they were becoming a doctor in Cuba. But it's volunteer opportunities. If you want to volunteer, then what you should do is you should go with the Mayday Brigade or the Venceremos Brigade, because there's always a voluntary work component.
Right now, Dottie Morris says.
But if you're there and you just wander into family health, a family doctor office, you can always ask them if they want your help. Why not?
So Dottie Morris, you say you have your hand up. Is that because you have a question? In general, we're asking people
No,
to
it's 'cause
put
she's coming.
questions in the chat.
It's because she's coming.
It's because she's coming. Very good.
Yes.
And
Can you
also
hear me?
Isabel
Yes.
Smitey is coming. Or Smitty, Isabel Smitty, which is great.
So do you want to, if people want to keep asking questions, maybe we could start calling on people.
We can. Let's see. There's a question already in the chat that from Christine Malpica. I'd like to touch base with you, I guess that's you, Mary, about traveling to Cuba before January 20th. I've heard now is not a good time to go, but this talk is suggesting otherwise. I don't want to be a drain on a stressed system. Is there an opportunity to go with a nonprofit service group or with a friend and stay at a casa? Particulares. And travel on my own. I'd like to do something of service while there and also go to the Jazz Fest, take Spanish salsa classes. I've seen a travel tour company, and I wonder if you know about this group, cubagrouptour.com.
I don't know that group, but I want to address this question of whether you're going to be a drain or a stress.
Okay.
You are not going to be. You're going to be going to a country that is under great stress and great duress from us. And when you go, you're going to be offering friendship. That's number one. And, when somebody's beating you up, it's nice to have a friend. Number two, you're going to be spending US dollars. One of the main reasons that Cuba is in the pickle it's in is that its own currency has no value outside its borders. Thanks to the United States, it's cut off as much as possible from getting hard currency through its own exports and labors. And you will be spending dollars in Cuba, and those will go into the hands of private people. They will also go work their way back into the hands of the government, and the government can then use that to try to get medical supplies and powdered milk and food and petroleum. Yes, they should have solar panels, but everything in its time, they'll get there. So no, you're not a burden, and you're most welcome, and you'll be able to do stuff. I know there's a desire to be able to be of service, but there's not a lot of institutions set up in Cuba to have volunteers. There just aren't. You can comb the web and see if you can find some. Most of the ones that I know that do service are religious organizations, so you can start by looking there. And, you know, as I just explained in the video, you can book a flight, you can book a place to stay, and you can just do what I say in the video, make your own way around. You can make friends, you can knock on the door of a clinic and see if anybody wants your help. Does that answer the question?
We'll find out if there's another one asked, but
Thank
the
you.
company, my understanding, it seems Sarah Wilson's very knowledgeable. This company that was Cuba Group Tour is Cuban Adventures, and they were mentioned on the suggested list. And she agreed. She added comments consistent with what you just told her as well, Mary. Okay, there's a few more points. Okay, is it possible to buy medical supplies from a bodega like Supermercado 23 and have them sent to people you know in Cuba?
You know, I don't know if any of they or anybody else carries medical supplies. I don't know, but there are sites on the Cuba Assistant Network that take medical supplies. Hatway, the Hatway Project is, I can't remember what they're doing, but they're doing something. Pazamor takes supplies. I think probably if you did it through one of those services, it would probably take as long as it would take going through not just tourists. So, you know, the other thing you can do is well, I guess if you're not going yourself, how would you send them? There are companies in Florida especially that send packages for people, and there's also big companies like Crowley Shipping, and then there's smaller ones like Cuba and different ones. But those go mostly to individuals. So the other thing that you might do if you want to send medical supplies is send them with the Mayday Brigade, which is going. Or that's what you might do. But I have not seen anything but food, hardware, cars, motorcycles, machinery in any of those service ones. I could be mistaken, but I haven't seen it.
Well, there's many appreciative comments in the chat, thanking you and others for the presentation and for answering questions, including Sarah's question, Sarah answering questions. And some folks are signing off, and some folks, are there more questions? There's
So
some.
since we're down to 23 people, we could also have people ask their own questions if they wanted to.
That's true.
Ms. Trujillo is also connected to the Charles Drew Medical School in LA that sends supplies. Is that what I just saw drip by?
The one about the
Yes,
team.
she does.
Yeah. Great.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah, this is Charles Sharp. I just had a meeting the other day with Ms. Trujillo, and I'm going with them. And because what you're saying, you're reinforcing what she's already said to me, that they want to be friends, and they want to establish relationships. And that's why I'm going, because I'm in the Homeland Security Emergency Management. And I was the deputy chair of the Global Health Security Agenda Consortium. So during COVID-19, I had a lot of questions. Where is Cuba in addressing this problem at the table, the Global Health Security Agenda? That's just how I felt. You know, hey, they're being left out. I knew what they had, the lack of the resources. They have, if they had the resources, they could have provided vaccine for all the Caribbean island nations. But well, yeah, that's something I'll talk to them when I get there about that. But I just wanted to give those notes there for the nurse that usually check with the med school. They may already be doing something with Cuba. But I know to Charles Drew Medical School out of LA, Mr. Hill is already associated with them. We had a long discussion about it.
You know, I'm really
Sorry, I
glad to
didn't
hear. No, I'm really glad to hear you say that. As I said, I spent the pandemic in Cuba, the first year of the pandemic. And I felt so safe. And I watched in horror what was happening to everybody here. And we were so well taken care of. And the other thing is that Cuba, throughout the pandemic, this is how they went broke, was producing so many medicines that could have helped us here. They had medicines that could stop the cytokine storm. They had medicines to protect the elderly. They came up with protocols that really helped. And that's aside from the contact tracing and the attention to contacts. I mean, they did everything right. And they had cases in maybe 1 or 2 nursing homes and none in their prisons. And Charles, I couldn't get any of the scientists that I had sent to Cuba back and forth for years. I couldn't get them interested in looking at what Cuba had to offer for medicines. It was so sorrowful, I cannot tell you. And then, of course, they invented their vaccines, and we and the rest of the world had to pool all our resources to send syringes. But they got the country. I left in, well, anyway, by the time I left, whenever it was, they had rolled out their vaccines, and in less than 9 months, they had everybody over the age of 2 vaccinated.
Yes, I was aware of that.
And you know this, right? And then they were sending
Yes.
medical brigades to help all over the world. They rescued Italy.
Yes, Italy was a part of the global health security agenda, uh, and but they never mentioned it. But I knew the resources that were lacking in Cuba, and it seems as though, and I'll say it when I'm here in DC, I'll say it to the ambassadors. You guys have selective amnesia. You know, we need to help this country. They went through an earthquake within the last 2 months.
2
And
earthquakes.
2 earthquakes, yes.
2
I'm aware.
earthquakes, 2 hurricanes.
And it's like there's selective amnesia across the board. What's wrong with this? You know, it's like, and that's why I'm going. When I mentioned the Caribbean Disability Network, uh, that's something that one of our members out of Boston is working on, the Caribbean Disability Network, to look at all the islands getting together. That's just not Nassau, Grenada. It's also Cuba. That's why I'm going there. And Haiti. Haiti has to be in this also. And that is something that the old school, I tell the young kids, know the history, because you're the ones that's going to make the change. You have to make the change and know what's going on, because we are human, we are humane, and we are humanitarian. That's it. I'm sorry. Let me get.
No, thank you.
No.
And wait a minute, Mary, wait. I know that we have somebody who has a question.
Wait a minute. But before that, I have to say something to Charles.
Yes.
Charles, I would very much like for you to be in touch with Bob Schwartz of Global Health Network. which supplies medical supplies to Cuba. And also, I would like to know who you have here in Boston. Your email will be in the registration. May I write to you?
You know, I've registered for this, but Louis Elisa, he's in District 7. I know the issue they have in District 7, even with the baseball. So I'm aware of a lot of crisis going on in the U.S. and globally. But Cuba now, enough is enough. Enough is enough.
Well, if you don't mind, I will put you in touch with Bob Schwartz.
All right.
Okay, can
And we-
I ask
Okay.
my question here?
Yep.
Yes, go ahead, Nina.
Oh, thank you. You mentioned that it's important to spend money in Cuba. I agree. Let's say if I want to stay there for 6 months, and kind of spend money for 6 months, but I have to get money from the United States. I mean, I cannot take with me, like, I don't know, like $50,000 or something like that. I have to receive on a regular basis some money to stay there for 6 months. And I heard people saying that they stay for a long time. How can they do that?
Well, it's not easy to get money from the US. There are agencies like Cuba Now that will transfer money to you.
Oh, yeah, really?
Yes, yes. There may be others as well. And Sarah, who knows a lot, she may have some other ideas. Or you may have to periodically fly back to the Bahamas or the US to get more money.
From an ATM. Okay. So
But
can
you can look into Cuba Now, Cubal. Do you speak Spanish?
you? Yes.
So Cuba Now is the agency.
CUBAYAMA.
No. LLAMA.
Oh, okay. LLAMA. Cubana. Okay. All right. Thank you. I'll find out.
But it's an issue and it's a problem. It's called the blockade.
Yeah, yeah. And the state sponsors a terrorism designation. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Oh, yeah, it is. It's,
Yeah,
it's,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
ridiculous.
it is. We're the big sponsors of terrorism, the United States. But anyway, we are getting on to 9 o'clock, and some of us want to wrap up. There's all kinds of stuff in the chat, though, so I definitely want to save the chat. And your contact information will be available to people. You've already provided it, but you can do it again, Merri. Are there any final things to say?
Well, I will say, yes, my contact information is there. I'm going to be traveling to Florida over the holidays and then to Cuba. So I may or may not get back to you right away, but I will.
So, any other final comments, Cole or Merri or anyone? I mean, I think it was a very helpful meeting, and people got a lot of their questions answered, and a lot of people want to go. So it's very spirited, and that's all I have to say. Are we forgetting anything important?
I think we covered a lot. Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thank you for being here. We still have 19 people who are starting to wrap up. People are leaving. And somebody asked just briefly, Michael Hoey, how good is your internet once you get to Cuba, Merri?
Well, it depends on how the electricity is.
Yeah, varies. Okay. All right. So we're going to wrap. We will share this. Everybody who was registered will get this. And people, if you want to have all the chat, save it. We're going to try saving it too and sharing it, but it's easier, I think, if the people who want to save and do it on their own. So I think that's all.
Hey, good night, everyone.
Yeah, good night.
Thank
and
you,
may-
everybody.
May we
See you
have
in
friend-
Havana.
Yes, may we have friendly relations with our
Of course, you
neighbors.
might be going to Santa Clara or Santiago, but if you come to Havana, I'll see you there.